Howdy folks, welcome back to War Thunder with the mighty Jingles, carrying straight on from where we left off. In yesterday's ground forces video, we're still in realistic battle, but this time we're in aircraft, and things did get a hell of a lot better. But first, they got a hell of a lot worse. This is the replay of a realistic battle on the New Guinea map, and what you're actually looking at here is the enemy team loading in as the replay spools up. Did you see the kind of aircraft they were flying? Don't worry, we'll come back to them in greater detail. Meanwhile, my team consists almost entirely of A6M3 Zeros. We've got one guy in a KI-43, we've got one guy in a KI-84, and one guy in a Focke-Wulf 190. Other than that, everybody on the team is flying the Mitsubishi A6M3. Now, the Mitsubishi Zero was designed in 1939. It first entered service in 1940. The M3 version had a slightly more powerful engine, which didn't deliver that much more top speed, only 11 kilometers per hour more, and it sacrificed a hell of a lot of range, and it didn't turn as well, although it did have better dive and high altitude performance. Aside from the supercharged new engine, this is essentially a 1940 vintage aircraft. Now, I'm not going to make you watch this game because it was an absolute slaughter. The Japanese just got annihilated, and that comes as absolutely no surprise. To explain why, we're going to drop back to the hangar and we're going to look at the various aircraft that were flying in this battle. So back to the hangar, and there's the A6M3. 80% of my team were flying this aircraft. It's a 1940s vintage aircraft with a 1941 redesigned engine. It has a battle rating of 3.7. What were the enemy team flying? Well, at the bottom end of the matchmaking scale, they had a couple of P-47D Thunderbolts, and that also has a battle rating of 3.7, so that seems pretty fair. Well, yeah, it seems pretty fair, but more on that in a moment. Next up, the Hawker Tempest Mark V, the Vickers P version. This has a battle rating of 4.0. The Supermarine Spitfire F Mark IX. This has a battle rating of 4.3. Also, with a battle rating of 4.3, the Hawker Tempest Mark 1B Late. And then, to round things off, right at the top end of the matchmaking spread, you have one of my favourite aircraft, the Supermarine Spitfire Mark 5C, with a battle rating of 4.7. So that's the matchmaking spread. And that, pretty much in a nutshell, is what the War Thunder Matchmaker is designed to do. It gives you two teams where the ranking spread between the lowest tiered and the highest tiered aircraft in that game does not exceed one battle rating. So 3.7 at the bottom, 4.7 at the top, and that's exactly what it's done. So what are you complaining about, Jingles? Well, what it's not supposed to do is stack one team consisting 80% of aircraft right at the bottom of the matchmaking spread, and the other team consisting of aircraft 60% of which are all in the top 50% of the matchmaking spread. That is the equivalent of going into a game of World of Tanks, finding yourself in a Tier 7 battle where the enemy team consists 60% of Tigers and 12 of your 15 tanks or Tier 5 M4 Sherman mediums. Of course, in practical terms, it's not quite as bad as that. In their aircraft, they're not tanks. It's not like Shermans trying to shoot at the front of Tigers from 300 metres. Anybody can shoot anybody down in War Thunder. I've seen people in Gloucester Gladiators taking out people in Yak 3Ps. It just depends how good you are and how bad they are. But at the same time, it doesn't help when you're starting with a massive handicap like this. And yet, that's exactly what happened in this game. And that's not unusual. War Thunder does this all the time. But even that isn't the worst thing that's wrong with War Thunder's matchmaker. And that's tied into the battle ratings that it actually gives these aircraft. Let's take a closer look at some of the aircraft on the enemy team. We've already seen the Zero. It's a 1939 design, entered service in 1940, upgraded in 1941. What were the enemy team flying? What did they have at the bottom end of the matchmaking scale? Well, that would be the P-47 Thunderbolt. This has the same battle rating as the Zero, so it's an equivalent aircraft, yeah? No, not at all. Not even slightly. It does have the same battle rating. But whereas the Zero was designed in 1939 and first entered service in 1940, this thing was designed in 1941, was first delivered to the Air Force in 1942, and didn't fly its first combat mission until the middle of 1943. This is a 1943 aircraft. And it has the same battle rating as a Japanese 1941 aircraft. What the hell? And it only gets worse from there. What was the best aircraft on our team? Well, we had one Focke-Wulf 190 A5. Has a battle rating of 4.7. Of course, the enemy team had a bunch of Mark 9 Spitfires. Why is that significant, Jingles? Well, the Mark 9 Spitfire is the version of the Spitfire designed by the Royal Air Force. You guessed it, specifically for fighting Focke-Wulf 190s. Although technically it wasn't quite as good. It was a stopgap measure, but it was still capable of going up against and holding its own against Focke-Wulf 190s. And it has a lower battle rating. And while we're looking at the Spitfires, this is where it just gets seriously bizarre. The Mark 9 Spitfire has a lower battle rating than the Mark 5C Spitfire. And yet, when the Mark 9 was being tested by the Air Fighting Development Unit of the Royal Air Force in April 1942, their report said that the performance of the Mark 9 was outstandingly better than the Mark 5. Not just better, outstandingly better. And yet the Mark 5 has a battle rating of 4.7, and the Mark 9 has a battle rating of 4.3. So what else did the enemy team have? Well, the Typhoon Mark 1B late, which first saw operational service in 1943, and the Vickers Tempest Mark 5 Vickers P version, which first entered service so late in 1944 it was almost 1945. And this is War Thunder's matchmaker, working as intended. One team stuffed with aircraft right at the bottom end of the matchmaking scale, another team stuffed with aircraft right at the top of the matchmaking scale. And that in itself isn't the biggest problem, although it is pretty bad. The biggest problem is that a lot of these aircraft have battle ratings that they just shouldn't have. And the reason the aircraft have these messed up battle ratings is because Gaijin do not assign battle ratings based on when aircraft were introduced into service or how good the actual aircraft is. They assign battle ratings based on how much people are sucking in them. So if idiots are trying to turn fight against Zeros in P-47D Thunderbolts, and idiots always try to turn fight against Zeros in P-47 Thunderbolts, the P-47 gets its battle rating adjusted down to make it easier for the idiots. And this, of course, also explains the disparity between the battle rating of 4.7 in the Mark 5 Spitfire and 4.3 in the Mark 9 Spitfire. It's not because the Mark 5 is a better aircraft than the Mark 9. It wasn't. The Mark 9 was better in almost every respect. But the Mark 5 is substantially easier for stupids to do well in. It's a good turn fighter, and it has 4 powerful 20mm cannons. So when anybody who's not flying anything Japanese keeps trying to turn fight against Mark 5 Spitfires and getting their arses handed to them, Gaijin take a look at these kind of battle result statistics and say, wow, the Mark 5's doing well, we'd better raise the battle rating. So, how can this be allowed to continue? Well, put simply, most people don't know, don't care, and aren't affected by it. People who keep trying to turn fight in Thunderbolts are going to keep trying to turn fight in Thunderbolts regardless of the battle rating of the aircraft. And most people play in arcade, where the difference in the flight models is negligible and really doesn't make that much difference. On the other hand, if you do know how to play these aircraft, and you are playing in realistic or simulator, where more accurate flight models prevail, then if you're flying a P-47 Thunderbolt at battle rating 3.7 and you're going up against A6 M30s also at battle rating 3.7, well, it's just party time, isn't it? Now, I do realise that for a lot of you out there this is just going to be old news, but for a lot more of you it's not, and that's why you can take the A6 M30, which is a 1940, 1941 aircraft at the most, and go up against enemy teams that are chock full of 1942, 1943 and 1944 aircraft, and Gaijin doesn't think there's anything wrong with that. So I do apologise, this video has been a bit of a bummer, but I thought I'd get this video up today out of the way to catch all of the hate in the comments. There is going to be another War Thunder video later on. I did promise you some glorious aerial combat, and I have had some glorious aerial combat when the matchmaker wasn't being drunk. And that's coming up in another War Thunder air combat video, realistic battle once again, later today. I hope you enjoy that one, even if you didn't enjoy this one. Take care, and I'll catch you next time.